Welcome to today's lesson on the central limit theorem. There's actually no new content, no new questions. You should know how to answer all three of these questions, but the point of this question is to highlight the difference between two that look very similar, but are in fact drastically different. So this question says that they're normally distributed, so we know it's a chapter 6 question. It's not asking for the mean of the sample means or the standard error of the mean. So I know I want to draw a picture. Has a mean of 100. How many would you expect to have an IQ over 110? So over, of course, means we're going to shade to the right. We know how much, we know where the mark is. We don't know how much we shaded. So it's a dist question. So I'm going to use my probability notation. And I'm going to write this down, but I would ask you to stop and think about this. I wrote down the probability that x is greater than 100. Do I mean x or do I mean x bar? Notice that part A does not mention mean or average, so it really is x. It's not x bar. Now, since it's greater than, we're going to use the complement rule. Mean of 100. Standard deviation. Since this did not use x bar, since part A doesn't mention mean or average, my standard deviation is the basic 10 that they provided. And let's actually calculate this. And I realize I'm going to need an extra line. And we get 0.1587. That's not the answer to the question. What we just calculated was the probability that a person would have an IQ above 110. But the question says how many people out of 20. So we're going to 0.1587, and we're going to multiply it by 20. And again, since 0.1587 is not an exact number, please cell reference it. Times 20, we get 3.17. So of those 20, we would expect 3.17 to have an IQ greater than 110. We have seen questions like this before, all the way back in Unit 1, as a matter of fact. But take note of the fact that we did use a dist, and we actually have units in our answer. That doesn't happen very often. I think really only on the questions like this. This one says how many people or how many boxes of cereal, how many whatevers, where you actually get units. So part B, still normally distributed, still draw my picture. The probability their average IQ is above 110. So my picture is going to look completely identical to part A. Mark at 110, shade to the right. But this time it says the probability that their average, so x bar, is greater than 110. Now, since I shaded to the right, or since it's greater than, it's still the complement rule. And this time, since we are using x bar, since the question did ask about average, I do need to adjust my standard deviation and say 10 divided by the square root of 20. Now it gives me a number in scientific notation. You can take care of this a lot of different ways. If you can convert easily scientific notation, that's probably the fastest way. If not, you can format the cells. Change it to a number and show however many decimal places to convince me that it's not 0. And there it was at 6 decimal places. Notice that for this question, it did ask for a probability. So once I type that into Excel, I'm done. I don't have to multiply by the 20 like I did in part A. So for part C, how high, so we're thinking to the right side, would be unusual. So we're shading 0.05, would be considered an unusual average. Again, this one uses the word average, so I'll put X bar instead of X. So this will be an ENV question. There's 0.95 in the unshaded region. So for probability to the left, it's 0.95. And my standard deviation, since it's talking about average, it is 10, but unlike the last part, it's 10 divided by square root of 100, since we changed the number of people. Oops, no true. So 101.64. Now, normally I would tell you for ENV questions to think about the units, but IQ does not have any units, so we can just leave it as 101.64. So again, the main point of this question was to compare A and B. When do you adjust the standard deviation, like part B? When do you not, like part A? When do you multiply by the n, like part A? And when do you not in part B? As always, if you have any questions, please ask.